If you've been in the NFT space for a while, whether that be in Veve or some of the other projects that we've been talking about on this channel, you'll know that there's some massive mistakes that we make in the beginning. So in this video, we're going to talk about those mistakes so we can learn to not make them again and also help those who are just getting into this space to not make the same mistakes that we did. So let's get started. Welcome everyone, my name is Andy and I appreciate you taking some time out your day to come watch this video on the channel. Just before we get going, if you are enjoying the content, you want to support me further, you can hit that subscribe button. And if you want to support me further than that, you can join the membership. Obviously, this space is so new that there's going to be a lot of mistakes that happen. And because NFTs have allowed a sort of average consumer to come into art in general and potentially make some financial gain from this, there's also going to be a lot further mistakes happening because it's so easily accessible. It's not to say that it's still quite challenging because there's millions and billions of people who are not involved in NFTs. They think they're the bane of this world, they're the downfall of all of it. I do understand some of their arguments and why this space actually needs to grow and develop itself a little bit further. But if you are getting into here and you want to learn more about it and you're open-minded to what could potentially be the case or even some financial return for yourself, then this video can definitely help. So I'm going to go over some of the mistakes that I made and some of the mistakes I see a lot of people make when it comes to this space, not only in the NFTs, but just in general, and how you can actually learn and grow from that to become better and smarter in these situations. The first one that I think is always the most important to talk about is to be logical rather than emotional. And the problem that many people have, including myself in the beginning, that I was way too emotional with my investments, therefore would not make the right decisions when those investments were either ready to be taken out or actually ready to buy in, because I was either scared or emotional based on what I was actually purchasing and selling in the time. So one of the best things that you can do for this is to understand data to a better extent than an average consumer. This is through looking at websites that will give you that data. You've got stuff on OpenSea like Nansen. You've also got stuff on Veve like Komi Wiki, you know, things on layer 2 like Token Trove that can help you do that. So there are places where you can see data, analyze it a little bit further, and better understand why certain projects do certain things. There's going to be a lot of winners in this space just as much as there's going to be 10 times the amount of losers in this space. And that means you have to understand data probably better than the people who will never research anything and just emotionally dive into something because of FOMO or really not understanding this space and just listening to what they would classify as influencers. The problem with this sort of area, and when we move on to like the influencer sort of side, is that there's so much money for them to make that they could literally just be paid by anyone a lot of money to then make themselves a lot of money by shilling a certain project. And you do see it quite a lot happening. I don't think there's absolutely anything wrong with taking sponsorships. I just think it's important to understand where some of these mindsets are at, why they can be based on emotional instances rather than actual logical facts and data on why certain projects are actually good for what they are trying to build. The other thing to understand about this emotional logical area is the reasons for rising and falling prices. There's certain times where things happen that really shoot up prices for no reason, and then there's other times where it falls down for specific reasons or it rises for specific reasons. So one of the examples I'm going to give you is January in Veve. Now in November they had the biggest growth that they had had in the whole time that Veve has been announced, and this was because Disney came to what Veve was. There was hundreds of thousands of people going for these drops. It made sense that the market was pumping because there was a lot of people coming into this space. But in January we didn't really have anything exceptional that made this be the case. I believe the Ethereum move happened potentially in February if I'm not mistaken, and even if it did happen in January, it didn't mean there were going to be then more users coming in because we weren't getting on Immutable at that point. So in this time, Veve's prices hit basically their all-time high for majority of things on the market, and a lot of us didn't sell, including myself, because well, I am in here for 2 to 5 years, but that could have definitely been a point I should have hit that sell button for some of these things to recoup all of my investments. Because of my emotional attachment to Veve and that being one of the first companies that I came in when it was NFTs, I didn't take the leap of selling because I was emotionally attached to some of the things that I had purchased. And also because it's not like a stock, it's based on IP that you already know and you can actually visually see what you own, then again, it's a little bit harder for you to sell on things because it's there. Whereas if you're just looking at Google stock and you see that it's gone up 10% and you want to sell some off, it's a lot easier because you can't really see it or actually own it in a way that a digital IP of seeing your favorite superhero in front of you in AR actually does. Again, this is where we come to the rise and falls of why certain things happen. Another example I can give you is Hero actually recently came out with their first ever digital drop, and they are partnered with DC, released it, you can sell it on layer 2, and it's actually really well done for their first ever drop. I happened to sell basically everything I got at the all-time high because I was no longer emotionally attached to projects and I'm more so thinking logically with what I'm doing. Again, this is not to say that I wasn't thinking logically outside of that and outside of Veve before January, because I've sold and bought a lot of stuff in different times. What I am saying is that if we can become more logical in the decisions we're making on a consistent basis, we're going to make better decisions. Because when it's purely emotional, we really are going to make those wrong decisions at wrong times. We're going to panic, we're going to FOMO, and there's going to be a lot of mistakes that happen there. But when we actually analyze data a little bit further, we learn about rises and falls, we learn about FOMO, and we learn why people are in this space, we're going to be able to understand when prices are a little bit too good to be true, when we should maybe get out, actually when we should maybe get in if we believe in something for the long term. That one to me is always the most challenging one to talk about, convey, and then also learn yourself, because I am still learning in this space just like everyone else. I'm 23 Am I 23? Still learning to become more financially literate, and I'm trying to learn to become more logical with all the decisions I make. It's going to be a process, and I'm still going to make mistakes along the way, but as I become more knowledgeable in this space about all these little things that I'm talking about here, I am going to make better, consistent decisions, which will make me either better financial returns or just better general decisions over the long run. Second one is sort of related to that, but how to maybe push it a little bit further forward. And this is actually setting limits for yourself. Now, one of the best things that I had done in the beginning when I was trying to learn more logic and just make consistent profit rather than taking riskier bets was setting limits for what I was actually doing. A lot of us have bought due to FOMO. Let's be completely honest here. We've saw something we've liked, we've saw an influencer put it out and they've said, yeah, I really like this one. And you're like, you know what, I like that too. And you go and buy it and it ends up dropping like 80% the next day. We've all done it before, it's all happened, or most of us have done it. If you've not, fair play. But the way that I stopped this was by putting certain limits on the things that I was doing. So if I was wanting to buy something that was on an app, or if I was wanting to buy something on OpenSea, I would set a price that I was okay with buying it at. And if it didn't hit that price, then that's fine. And until it reached that price, I was educating myself further on what this project was, what it could maybe do for me in the future, how it could benefit the general community in this space, and how they could move forward. And then if it's something I was willing to sell and I was maybe too uncomfortable with selling it at that point, I would set a limit of what I was willing to sell it at, what price increase I was wanting to see before I would actually list that. And by this way, I was able to understand more about if I truly wanted to keep this item, if it was something I was willing to hold for the long run, did I see the long-term play of it, or was I all right with letting it go to take that profit on a consistent basis? By doing that, you're sort of drilling it into your mind, this process of buying and selling and why you're doing certain things. What's the reason for buying something? Is it because they're giving you something back for doing so? Are you a part of a community for it? Are you solely looking for financial gain? And understanding yourself a little bit further on how you trade, your risk tolerance, and what you can actually do with that as this space sort of progresses. This for me is something I've not been doing as much as recently, as I feel that I am becoming better at it and deciding when to buy and sell, but I'm sure that this can benefit a lot of people in here if they're still in that real emotional stage where they're not really sure on when to buy and sell, and FOMO sort of kicks in more than others. Next thing that we're going to discuss, and it's going to be maybe a little bit of a harder one, and it's knowing why people are truly here at this period in time. When it comes to the sort of differentiation of flippers and collectors in this NFT space in general, that's what we'll cover right now. There are more flippers than there are collectors, or true collectors in general. People who are getting into the likes of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! And Digimon and actual physical collections of comic books and toys and that sort of stuff. There are 100% flippers in those fields, but what I would say is that although they're looking for financial gain, they've not got the same short-term mind as NFT enthusiasts have. And this is because we've been so accustomed to insane returns that are so unsustainable, it's insane, in this space, and therefore are really demanding of what they should expect or what they believe they deserve for being in this space. What this does is it causes a lot of negativity. It causes a lot of people to be extremely fearful and extremely greedy and extremely unwelcoming in a space that is meant to be the future of what we're moving into. And you're probably wondering then, Andrew, what's the mistake here? What's happening here? Well, if you are coming into this space, do not expect anything and actually know why you're here. Most people are here for the financial return, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Most things in life, people are looking for financial return, as money is basically the thing that makes the world go round. People buy houses to rent out because they get financial return for it. People buy stocks because they're going to get financial return for it. People buy vintage cars because they're potentially going to get financial return for it. Are there people who just enjoy those things? Of course there are. But for the most part, when people are buying into investments, they're looking for a return on that investment. And because the majority of people in here as well are in sort of category, I would say anyway, of average consumers, especially the ones that are the most demanding, they don't actually understand how business works and are just wanting things all the time. This causes massive issues in this space because there's just so much negativity flying around. There's people just demanding things that are impossible to give, and they're expecting 10,000x returns in 2 seconds when it's just not feasible or viable. I don't think we've got to a stage yet where we're seeing the true builders this next decade is going to play out, because I think this place has to crash and burn before we actually truly find those builders who are going to get it to the place that we want to see this go. I believe Web3 is the next stage that we're going to. I believe this metaverse and what we're sort of talking about is going to be a part of our lives in the next maybe 2 or 3 decades. I think that will come into play, as for the last 2 decades, we have been moving into this digital era. Faxes really no longer exists. Newspapers are going out of popularity, especially physical ones and probably digital ones as well. We are moving into a space where we are living online. You're watching this online rather than in person. So there's more and more of this moving into this digital space. And I know there's this generalization that NFTs are just art, but they can be a lot more than that if we widen that scope and if we continue to push forward into this area. And there are people who are doing that continuously and are looking to do that over the next decade or so. But right now, the people who are in here mostly are looking solely for the financial gain and the financial return, and therefore it causes a lot of weird emotions in this space. And if you are coming into this space, or if you are in this space right now, understand it's just not healthy, and probably not a healthy way for yourself and your own emotions to be. We have to be, as I said, more logical. We have to look at things better, and we have to understand why we're in this space, because if we understand ourselves further, we're going to be able to make better decisions. The final thing I'm going to talk about today is from a book that I've been currently reading called The Bitcoin Standard. He talks about the concept of time preference, and it's sort of on the basis of time theory. So I'll give you an easier rundown. I'll just read it from here because it's probably easier to do. Time preference simply means the extent to which an individual is inclined to favour his or her present well-being or current consumption over future well-being and consumption. This means that someone with a higher time preference is more concerned about catering to his present needs than those in the future. On the other hand, an individual with low time preference or the ability to delay gratification places more priority on the needs of the future. So what this is sort of saying is that there's some people who are here as the sort of builders of this space. They've got the low time preference where they understand that delayed gratification is going to pay off in the long run because they've done their research, they understand fundamentals, and they understand what is actually going on in this space. There are others who are here with a high time preference where they're just demanding, don't care about how the future will run. It's just about the short-term gains and the short-term wins. This can cause some issues over the long run because, again, they don't actually understand what makes something good and what makes something bad. If there's one thing that I can say in this space, try to learn more about delayed gratification. It becomes a true winner in one day. It's not often an overnight success and has to be built up on years of building to get to this space. It's not to say that there aren't outliers, as I know they are, but stuff like the Bored Ape Yacht Club took a year to actually take off, and we're probably thinking about this concept for a few years before they'd actually started it. Now they really are a multi-million-dollar company, hundreds of millions of dollars more likely, and they are continuing to push forward. It's not to say that companies can't do an overnight success, but what I'm saying is that if you are in this space and you believe this is going to be successful over the next decade, over the next 2 decades, and will become our future, look for those people who are actually aiming for that change in the future. What are they going to do that will stand out from other companies? What did Google do so well as the biggest search engine in the world? Things like Amazon that has made our lives extremely easier when it comes to ordering things online and getting them in a quicker time. What often succeeds is what makes people's lives easier and better. So if we can find out those things that are going to make our lives better over the long run, that are going to save people time, save people money, make people's futures better, then those are the things that people want to invest in. I really like talking about these videos because there are still mistakes that I make when I talk about these, but it helps me articulate it further and then learn more how to do it better in the future. But I'd love to hear some of the mistakes that you've made and the lessons that you've learned from them. So be sure to put it down in the comments. I know the video on the screen right now will be something you'll love to watch. Have a fantastic day.